Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I would now like to call to order tonight's September 13th meeting of the Albany Planning and Zoning Commission. Would you please join me for saying the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anne, could we please do a roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Jennings. Here. Commissioner Kent.
Here.
Commissioner Minotti. Here. Chair Geeson Fields.
Present. All right, so our first item up is ex parte communications and disclosures. Are there any ex parte communications or disclosures that a commissioner would like to make? No. Okay. Seeing none, I have none. I will close that item and move on to the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered routine and/or administerial, meaning simply that staff would typically approve these projects without the commission's review. And so given that, any items on the consent calendar will be considered by a single vote of the commission. We will not have individual discussion of any items on the consent calendar unless one of the commissioners requests to pull an item from the consent calendar or someone in the audience requests to pull an item from the consent calendar.
I have just two corrections for the consent calendar. For the informational item regarding 1100 San Pablo, there actually is no action that's required for the commission to take. It's simply informational.
Okay.
And then with respect to 1037 Ventura, the applicant is actually seeking a parking exception and not a reduction. And so we went ahead and crafted findings and posted those revised findings with the agenda online.
Okay.
And it is an exception to have the second off-street parking space in the front yard setback, so they will have two off-street parking spaces.
Okay. Sorry.
If they want input on 37 Ventura, why was it on the consent? The item of discussion.
Given the scope that was proposed, we thought it might be more appropriate on the consent calendar because it's an addition that's at the back of the property. It has limited visibility from the street.
Okay.
Can I ask the neighbor across the street from them, in the fall, didn't we vote to rescind the additional parking space requirement?
Ma'am, if you would like to discuss an item that's on the consent calendar, you can request to have it pulled, and we will do a full discussion of that item. But right now, we are just simply getting clarification from staff, and I have also posed the question, if there is a specific item that you would like to have a discussion about, we can pull that. But we haven't gotten to the point where we're actually discussing individual items yet.
Okay, I just stepped out of street training to come over here.
Great. And what item specifically are you concerned about?
I'm Nancy Hartman. I live at 1028 Ventura, kitty corner across the street from Tim and Teresa.
Okay, so you're here about the two-story addition at 1037 Ventura. Okay, and so what we can do is we will pull that item from the consent calendar so that we can discuss it with members of the audience, the public, as well as the commission. But that moment hasn't quite arrived yet, but thank you. Okay, so we have one item from the audience that would like to be pulled, which is planning application 17-048. The design review parking reduction for two-story addition at 1037 Ventura. Are there any other items that either someone from the audience or a commissioner would like pulled from the consent calendar?
Nope.
Okay. And if that's the case, I will entertain a motion.
Move 5-1 the minutes and 5- San Pablo.
Okay. So there's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so there's been a motion and a second to approve item 5-1 and item 5-2, the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes and the informational item on 1100 San Pablo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the meeting minutes have been approved from July 26th, as well as the informational item. 1100 San Pablo, which leaves us with the Planning Application 17-048, design review and parking reduction for a two-story, parking modification for a two-story addition at 1037 Ventura.
Do you want a staff report, or do you want to go right into public comment?
I guess if you would mind doing a brief staff report, sort of abridged version, if you will, just to make sure everybody's clear on the subject.
We do have a pretty brief PowerPoint for you.
Okay, great.
This is planning application 17048, design review and parking exception for a second-story addition at 1037 Ventura. Background on the property: the subject site is a 4,050 square foot lot with an existing 1,577 square foot home built in 1941. City records show that plumbing work was done in February of 1976 and that a re-roof was done in December of 1987. Here's the street view of the property as it looks today. Project requests. The applicant is seeking design review and parking exception approval for a 650 square foot second story addition at 1037 Ventura. Design review is required for the 211 square foot single story addition and the 439 square foot second story additions located at the rear of the home. A parking exception is required to allow the required off-street parking space to be located in the front yard setback. Here's an existing elevation. And here's what's proposed. Parking. The project scope triggers an additional off-street parking space for the home. A parking exception is required to locate that second off-street parking space in the front yard setback. The existing driveway is 17.71 feet in length. And here's just an excerpt from the survey map, site map. Correspondence is received. Staff has received one correspondence voicing concerns of the overall size of the home. The applicant has provided a neighbor approval list that was included with the staff report. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA review. And recommendation, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and approve the proposed project subject to the attached findings and the conditions of approval.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff about this item? Okay, I'm seeing no one. The one question I had was, if I remember reading the staff report, because currently they basically have one off-street parking space in their building enclosed, but because of the size of the additions, it's basically triggered the requirement for a...
Right, it exceeds the 240 square foot threshold.
Okay. Okay, if there are no comments for staff, would the applicant like to address the commission and tell us any information that you think might help us better understand the project?
My name is Mike Porzant, and I designed the project. I'm also general contractor to build the house or do the addition. As far as I know, during last few weeks, my clients attempted to talk to most of the neighbors in the Ventura Avenue, and I believe mostly we got a positive feedback from all the neighbors. We had only one letter which was opposing to the project came later, and almost at the last minute or last hours of the today I received that, and most of the items that they are presenting in the letter are not very accurate, but I still have the answer for them. If you wish, I can go ahead and answer them. One was that she calls the project a two-story project, two-story addition project. Actually, it's not. It's just it's only 440 square feet addition at second floor. Most of the building, or most part of the building, is one story. And part of it is sitting on top of the crawl space, the other part sitting on top of the basement and garage. So it's not a full two-story project. It's just a 440 square feet addition. Then they are complaining, or they anticipate to hear noise from this project. The address is 1035 and I believe 1032 from Ottaway Street. Both of these houses, the first one is about 275 feet. The second house is about 425 feet from the construction site. And they are blocked by both houses from the east and west side of the Ventura Street. So I doubt there are going to be any noise from our project to the address that they are mentioning here, because first of all the construction project, as you know, have to be within the allowable noise limits by the city. So we can, even like jackhammering and all that, which we have actually done some repair last few weeks, is not going to get to the address that they are talking about, the 1032 and 1035 Ottaway. And they are concerning about we are creating a parking issue for that neighborhood. As far as we do the project, we have about 40 to 45 feet front yard or aligning with the street that we can park our car there. And most of our neighbors are usually parking in front of their houses, which is average about 40 to 45 feet street side and the curb side. So I doubt that it's going to create any serious parking issue during the construction. They were talking about actually she calls this a monster-sized home, which I don't know what the size is. What's a reasonable size in Albany, but honestly, 227 square feet, considering the parkings, and it doesn't seem very big house. It's not. We disagree with the monster houses, but this is not the one. Honestly, it just is a little bit a stretch of imagination, I would say. And they were also talking about the limiting parking, privacy, and natural sunlight. Each of these houses is about at least 300 feet away from us. We don't have any impact on those.
Thank you. Thank you. Were there any questions of the applicant? Okay. Now I will open it up to the public for the public comment period. So if there's anyone, ma'am, feel free, come to the podium and speak into the mic.
And when you're done, if you could fill out a speaker card so we have your name for the property file.
I'm Nancy Hartman, and I live at 1028, which is just kitty corner across from 1037. I've bought my house 22 years ago, and why I came to ask about this parking, I had signed the neighbor consent that Tim and Teresa so kindly asked us to sign before I saw this postcard. And the postcard reads, "A parking reduction is required to waive one required off-street parking space." Now, I was sure that I voted to rescind an extra parking law last fall. And I didn't have time or didn't think to review my notes about the election ahead of time. But can you comment on the parking regulation now?
I can comment on that.
Please.
So what you voted on last year was a provision to establish language within the municipal code that allows the city council to establish parking standards by conventional ordinance rather than having it be a vote of the people. Since January, this commission has been working on an update to the parking regulations, and it's going to city council on Monday night at 7:30.
Wow. Okay, so this is quite timely. Then have you been, as a planning commission, ruling on each of the parking requests as they come in?
All parking requests go before the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, so if I want to build a tiny house in my backyard, and it's over 240 square feet, would I be required now to come before the Planning Commission and,
If you, I don't want to get into too much of a back and forth, because this is the kind of thing we can handle on the counter, but I can tell you, if you were going to build an accessory dwelling unit, you would not be subject to parking. We're superseded by state law.
that's it. Okay, now I understand. Thank you. And I must say, just to address the board, parking is getting quite crowded on our street. However, we have Manor Way, that's a little sidewalk that can walk over to Ordway, and we can park on Ordway. So if I were to have a party, I would tell most of my friends, park on Ordway, walk through on Manor Way, and you're right near my house. So I love Teresa and Tim already, and I'm really pleased that they bought the house across from me. I'm a little concerned about the parking.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to address the commission on this topic? No? Seeing no one, I will close the public comment period, bring it back to the commission for a full discussion and/or vote. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a design.
It's design review and parking exception.
Yeah, so we are considering whether, basically, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the question for us is, do we want to allow them to have their second required off-street parking space in their front yard setback, i.e. their driveway? And so with that, I'll leave it with this commission. If there's a commissioner who would like to say anything, or?
Yeah. So first thing I checked out here was that this is one of those parking stalls where you have the walls on both sides. If it's too narrow, you can't use it because you can't open your doors. But I think the 11 feet 1 inch is enough space to park there comfortably. And it's not really a visual blight because it's recessed a little behind the landscape. People, it's pretty common practice to park in your driveways in Albany, so I can't really see holding that as an obstacle against this addition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just, I wanted to clarify, actually, for the neighbor who just spoke. I think when the notice went out, it was noticed as a parking reduction, but that has changed, right? So now they're proposing not to eliminate a parking space, but
They
just
will
to
have a
put it in
second
the
off-street parking space.
driveway instead. So just for your information, that's what we're considering tonight. And yeah, I also, I mean, we park in our driveway in the front yard setback because that's the only space there is. But at any rate, so at any rate, the only thing I wanted to make sure is that we can actually make the findings that we need to for this parking space. And so finding B in the staff report indicates that we have to find that the parking in the front yard will not exceed 7 feet by 6 inches in width, and it says that the proposed parking space is 9 feet 7. So I'm just curious if that's because that is the existing paved parking area, and we're essentially being asked to grandfather that, or?
I think that's correct, and we've actually changed this as part of the parking code update to be more crystal clear. But I think that what you identified was the original intent of it, was limiting the paved area.
Okay. So there wouldn't be new paving?
I don't believe so.
Maybe the applicant can.
If you wouldn't mind speaking to the mic, sir.
Yeah, is the driveway going to remain the same, or is it going to be expanded?
Yes, I mean, I'm sure the reason we have a little bit wider, because there are two small tracing walls in each side. The drive is sunken into the front yard. So we added a little bit to allow for the door to open.
I see.
I mean, otherwise, I mean, the paving area can remain the minimum requirement.
Okay.
And is this I'm sorry to interrupt, has that change been done already that you talked about, widening the driveway? Or is that proposed to happen?
I believe we showed in the plan, that's why we have 9 feet here.
Okay,
There is about 2 feet kind of tracing wall in each side.
okay, thank you. Just one thought is that if the issue with that regulation is to limit the amount of paved area, we could simply just keep the existing paved, and then any expansion would have to be gravel or
Right.
dirt or something like that.
Yeah, and if staff feels that would meet the intent of the finding that we're supposed to make, I would be comfortable making that recommendation.
Okay. And do you have any, I guess I'll just, 2 cents I'll throw in is, I mean, I think the change in overall building height is a modest change, considering that the limits are, I believe, 28 feet for the height in Albany, and so they're only adding, I think,
It's going to be 21 feet, 8 inches total.
yeah, so they could have expanded up taller, but they aren't. And as others have said, the addition is at the rear of the home. So aesthetically, we try to be a little more heavy-handed on the front of the house, the public face, if you will, of commercial and residential buildings. And that being said, they're not going to be eliminating any parking, but basically asking for a official okay to park in their front yard driveway, which in theory will hopefully actually help alleviate some of the parking problems so that they won't have to park on the street. And so I guess with that being said, in terms of the aesthetics of the project, they're more or less just extending the existing aesthetics. I had some issues in terms of like the placement of the windows on the side elevations of the building, but based on the floor plan, it looks like they're kind of locked in there because of locations of closets and whatnot, so I'm not gonna really be very nitpicky on that. I guess the one condition that I would be open to, as long as staff finds that it's okay to do, would be that they keep the actual paved area of their driveway as is, and then if you expand the sort of knee walls on the sides, that any new area on the grade be some kind of permeable material rather than extending the pavement out to the sides. But I guess with that, I don't really have any other comments. Commissioner Minotti, do you have anything you want to say about this item?
I think it's a modest improvement, and I'm ready to move the item when you're.
Okay. Yeah, I'm oh, I'm sorry. Ma'am, ma'am. First, you have to speak into the mic because we are recording this. Secondly, we've already closed the public comment period where we provided ample opportunity for anybody to speak on this item. It's about the whole project. All right, well, I will, because I'm feeling really great today, I will reopen the public comment period and allow you to come and speak if you like, if you just mind coming up to the podium. And if you can, after you're done speaking, before you leave, just fill out a public comment card for staff.
Sure. My name is Carol Hurwitz, and I live at 1041 Ventura. And I just wanted to comment that while you were talking about the front aesthetics, this house opens onto, or faces, doesn't quite touch, a circle, a cul-de-sac, in which about 4 houses can see the back. So the aesthetics of the back are important, and you didn't show the back. And I don't think it's a problem, but I just wanted to comment that this is unusually situated. And the other thing that came up, and probably we could discuss it, but I don't know what you can do about it, is that the noise is a little bit harsh. I was home this morning till 12:30, and it was really difficult to have the amount of noise, and I don't know what you can do about that.
And are you referring, excuse me, are you referring to the construction noise?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Do you know how long that'll go on?
I do not know how long their project will be under construction. I can ask the applicant to give us an idea, and just.
I'm not always there, but I just wanted to say that sometimes
There's no
it is.
permit yet, no construction.
And I just noticed it this morning, so
Okay. Okay, thank you, ma'am. I will try to get some clarification on that. I guess actually she brings up, and Commissioner Kent mentioned to me something. If you wouldn't mind just telling me, have you actually started any construction, or is there construction going on right now? Yes, please, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium. I guess that's not clear to me.
Yes, we got a permit for removing the brick fireplace chimney and replace it with the wood structure. We already got the permit, we started demolition or building that. Now, I believe that mostly that part of the house, especially demolition of the brick chimney and building a new chimney, is a little bit noisier than the rest of the construction. But even that, I believe, is not beyond the limit that we set by the city for the construction noise. Yeah, but yes, we do that. We also doing some termite repair on the other part of the house.
And am I correct in assuming that when you referred to the jackhammering, that was part of the brick chimney removal?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have any kind of, I know I don't want to lock you in anything, but just kind of a general idea in terms of the length of construction,
Yes,
if this is approved?
I give you very accurate. It's just from time of we get the permit, we probably going to finish this in 6 or maximum 7 months. Yeah.
6 or 7 months. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Okay. Thank you.
I just want to comment.
Yes, well, please.
We did, Carol, is she still here? Carol leave? Oh, there, yeah. We did look at it from West Place as the other direction you mentioned, the backyard, and that's a very compromised view. The buildings with the double gate there with a vinyl cladding and a steel ramp, it's a really awkward conclusion to that street. But you can see a little peekaboo view of the house over the fence. So you can see it from there, you're right, but it's not a dominant element. Oh, there, yeah. Val just showed me the story poles. Story poles make it much more dominant. So, yeah, well, maybe that'll improve the view of that conclusion of that street, because currently it's lacking. Needs a terminus point, maybe that.
Well, ma'am, I'm sorry. Ma'am, this isn't a back and forth discussion period. This is simply us discussing now. And so with that, I guess I'll open it up for a motion if someone would like to propose one.
I would move PA 17048 for the two-story addition at 1037 Ventura with the modification on the parking area deferred to staff to kind of work that out. Mm-hmm. In terms of the
paved versus gravel. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And before we vote, I would just like to say, I realize I didn't address this, your concern, Carol, about the noise. Unfortunately, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have control in terms of enforcing specific construction or prohibited construction hours. The city does have guidelines and regulations as to when construction can occur. Unfortunately, I sympathize with everybody that it does allow weekend construction. But one thing that we always do encourage with all of our applicants is that if there is anybody in the general vicinity of the project who has concerns about construction noise, that they try to work with them and possibly come up with a compromised construction time, or, for instance, eliminating a couple hours on the weekend so that it's not from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., or eliminating a whole day on the weekend, or whatever may be to help the situation. So I will just express that to the applicants, that hopefully you'll be able to work with your neighbors to come to some kind of good compromise and resolution on that issue. But that's unfortunately the most that we can do for that. Okay, so there's been a motion to approve and it's been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, your project has been approved as presented with that minor condition that staff will work with you on. Otherwise, there is a 14-day appeal period, so please do not make any permanent construction or decisions until that time has expired. Thank you. Okay, and our next item up is the public comment period. And this is available to anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission on an item that is not on our agenda. Again, I can't express this enough. This is for anybody who would like to speak to the commission on an item that is not on our agenda. Anything that is brought up that is on our agenda will have to wait till that agenda item comes up. And otherwise, you're free to talk to us about anything you'd like, and we will defer to staff for further review and possibly to be put on a future commission agenda if it's so determined. Is there anybody who'd like to address the commission for the public comment period? Okay, I see no one, so I will close the public comment period. And we'll move on next to our action items. And our first item, unfortunately, I think the ones that everybody are waiting for are at the end, but our first one will be, and I don't mean that pejoratively about the first item, we have a study session for PA 17-047, the design review and variance for a rear deck at 951 Castro.
Yes, this is design review and variance for our rear deck at 951 Castro. Some background on the property. The subject site is a 2,500 square foot lot with 50 feet of frontage and is 50 feet deep. An existing 1,339.6 square foot home rests on the lot with an existing non-conforming front and rear yard setback. City records show that termite repair was complete in August of 2000 as well as sewer repair in September of 2000. Here's a street view of the property as it looks today. And here's the APN map showing the atypical lot dimensions, 50 feet wide by 50 feet deep. Project request, the applicant is seeking design review and variance for a rear deck. The new rear deck is proposed to have a 5-foot setback from the rear property line. An interior remodel of the home and conversion of lower level storage space into a 72 square foot full bathroom is also part of the project scope. Here's the existing rear elevation. And here's what's proposed with the deck. Variance. A variance is required to allow the proposed deck in the rear setback area. All lots in the R1 zoning district are required to maintain a 20-foot rear yard setback. Due to the subject lot's atypical dimensions, 50 by 50, a rear deck of any size would render the deck non-conforming. The Albany Municipal Code allows the decks to encroach up to 6 feet into the required rear yard setback. The deck is proposed to measure approximately 7 feet deep by 26 in width and would have a 5-foot rear yard setback. Parking. There is one existing off-street parking space located in the attached single-car garage. The project scope does not trigger additional parking requirements for the property. No correspondences have been received. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA. Recommendation. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review the proposed plans and provide feedback to the applicant and staff and review the preliminary findings for a variance.
So with this, we're not asking you to take any specific action. This is really more an opportunity for you to take a cursory review of this and determine if you believe you can support the variance findings. If you can, we would come back to you at a future date with findings and an additional staff report.
Okay.
And was this item noticed
Yes.
to neighbors?
Yeah.
And then could you I just want to make sure that I'm understanding everything correctly. I look at the applicant's site plan, I guess it is, on their drawings, and it looks like basically they have the required setbacks shown, basically, or the offset of the setbacks. And if I understand correctly, it looks like basically the whole front of the building and the whole rear of the building, in addition to the porch, are all sort of non-conforming.
Yeah, with a 50 by 50 lot, it's really tricky to get anything conforming.
Okay. Okay. And then just another general question. Do you know if we have any other lots or properties similar to this condition?
Yeah, we do have several 50 by 50 lots, and in fact, the commission approved a variance in 2015, slightly different request, but effectively, they had a rear porch, which they enclosed to make part of the kitchen. And so it had I believe it was a 3-foot rear and side yard setback. And that was the same situation where they didn't have any conforming setbacks because of how the house was sited on the property.
Okay. Okay, and I guess those are my only kind of general questions, clarifications. Are there any other questions?
Well, related to that question, has the commission approved any other variances recently for, for similar structures that are that close to the back setback or the side?
There are two that come to mind, that being one that is on the 900 block of Nielsen, and that was a 50 by 50 lot. There was also a variance that was approved for 1492 Posen, where it actually had a 0 setback on the front because it was hindered by a sewer line in the rear yard and then an abnormally wide, a 16-foot wide sidewalk where 10 to 12 is pretty standard throughout the city. So to answer the question, we have had variances approved where there's relaxation of setback requirements.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, thank you. Is the applicant here? Would you like to kind of share anything about the project with the commission that might help us better understand the project? Okay, please.
My name is Rick Kern, I'm the owner. So you were asking about comparable 50 by 50 lots. Our next door neighbor is a 50 by 50 lot. And his rear deck extends to the limit of his property. So this would be way shorter than his deck.
Okay.
Is it similarly raised? Is his deck at a level that's
It's at the floor level of his inside. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, with the grade, it's
Right.
lower, but same idea.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you. Excuse me. Okay, and with that, I will open this item up to the public. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to share their thoughts with the commission about this project? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public comment period and bring it back to the commission for a design review and suggestions. I mean, I'll just start off by saying that the one thing that comes to me in the back of my head when I look at this project is, I know in the recent past we had that project that had the atypical lot size that was pretty small, where they wanted to do an extension of the house into the rear yard setback. And I know we were very sort of hesitant to approve the variance, and I think it was a study session at that point. And so now just seeing this project where the existing conditions sort of exceed what that other applicant was sort of modestly requesting makes me double think my hesitation on the other project. I don't know. I mean, are there any comments from the commission?
Just so clarity, so the deck can't extend into the setback. I thought you said it
So
could.
if this was a standard size lot with 100 feet of depth, it could extend up to 6 feet in the rear yard setback. So conceivably, under that provision, it could have a 14-foot rear yard setback.
Okay, but being that it's not standard,
Being that it's not standard, there's no way to make it work without a variance approval because of the lack of lot depth.
Yeah, I mean, basically the whole like 6 feet depth of the actual building in the rear is already non-conforming. So anything they do basically is going to be non-conforming.
Would you be able to pull up an aerial from Google Earth? I'm trying to look at it on my phone, but it's very poor resolution. I'm just trying to get a sense for what the neighboring properties are like.
Mhm.
And while that's happening, I will just make the observation that it does appear from the site plan that the outdoor space is pretty severely constrained, and it does seem that allowing a deck would create more usable outdoor space. in an attractive way. I'm just curious about, how it relates to the neighboring properties, especially since it will be raised off grade.
Okay, so I see the neighboring property. I think that the applicant was referencing his neighbor
Looks like they have identical rear and front yard setbacks.
footprints.
Ann, can you go over to Madison Street just to show kind of a cross-section of the adjacent property that's on the corner there and the deck there? You had mentioned the existing deck. I think it's an interesting example if you can actually do the street view.
Oh, you want it in street view?
3D view.
Thanks. There's a fence there, but I believe that what he was pointing out was the deck is there as well, right?
And the neighboring project seems to have a sort of bigger massing too with its two-story volume, even though it's on a,
Is that illegal? I mean, is that a permitted deck, or is it just?
I would have to verify that in our property records.
I guess one clarification I'd like to get from the applicant is, obviously the primary piece of this is the new deck in the rear yard. And the drawings just say, deck railing design to be determined. Do you have any sort of more information as to what the design may be? If it's going to be horizontal wood slats, open in between, or, lap woodboard siding for it, or stucco? Yes, please, if you wouldn't mind.
So, yeah, that's yet to be determined and open to feedback.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, and so, okay, great. Thank you. So I guess we're kind of a tabula rasa. We can see whatever we want. I think in general, I'm just going to throw this out there. I would definitely say kind of some kind of railing that might be somewhat visually allow people to see through, so that's not an opaque wall. Definitely, I would not recommend doing a stucco wall or anything like that. We'd like to try to break up the amount of stucco, so just to make sure. From the drawings, it looks like you're not going that direction. I just wanted to make sure, though. And then I guess another kind of clarification is, currently, would you use the space that's below that deck for anything, or would it just be for sort of like a mechanical storage, or, I guess, yeah, I'm just kind of curious if you had any intended use for that, like, half-height space below the deck? No?
Just access to the garage.
Okay. Okay, so it's basically just a space for the stairs so that you can get down to the basement level. Okay. I don't know, are there any thoughts?
Well, I think we all agree that it adds a lot to the livability of the space, but we're struggling over the findings, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of findings that bother me the most, and one is the no special privilege. I mean, it is a small lot, and so therefore with the small lot, you can't have all of the, you can't have everything a large lot has, obviously. You can't have a bigger house, you can't have all the deck. So I'm having trouble justifying the variances, although I think the deck, I'd really like to see it happen. I think it's really going to add to the livability of the house. I don't see really a big difference between having a deck there and putting a patio there, just a little better, easier. Just if somebody can help me get past the number 3. I think you have to find all of these, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and from my perspective, I don't anticipate, I mean, because of how constrained this site is, I think it's pretty straightforward to make the unique site findings, preservation of property rights, et cetera. The only one that I think we would want, that I would want more information about to feel comfortable making the finding is the adverse impacts on neighboring properties. So I think having a better sense, I mean, it looks to me from what I can see, like the deck would not be right up against, sorry, your neighbor's, house or windows, right? It would be adjacent to their backyard. Anyway, I think just trying to understand a little better how, what would be the experience from the neighbor's perspective of having that deck right there, and just making sure that it's that it isn't creating any of those adverse impacts.
And that brings up another issue is there's 4 large clear pane windows or doors there looking 15 or 12 feet from the neighbor's property. If they decide to extend back their house, which they can, then there all of a sudden there's a little bit of an invasion of privacy there. Where, that's kind of something we probably should consider. The gray one there right up.
Right, but so I think having additional information about, are the other lots already built out? Are they at their maximum FAR? Like, is there a possibility they will get, I mean, I know you can always tear down and rebuild, but just trying to get a better sense of, what's reasonably likely.
I think one thing we can also add in there is that the side yard setbacks are actually proposed to conform with, if they were, obviously they're constrained, so they're not going to expand the building envelope, but if they were in that, they are adhering to the 5-foot side yard setback requirement.
Okay. And so I think in general, just to make sure everybody in the audience understands what we're talking about, basically technically to approve a variance of the zoning code, which would be to allow somebody to build within the yard setbacks, requires us to make certain findings, basically things such as that there's no adverse effects to any of the neighboring properties, that there are unique characteristics that warrant this type of variance. And so what Commissioner Jennings was getting at was that for the applicant is that if this were to come up in design review, I think it would be prudent for you to either start a conversation with your neighbors, adjacent neighbors, to just either get them on record that they're okay with it, that they're okay with having the deck approach, and not that you necessarily have to do that, but something of that effect will, I think, help the commission have a better understanding of, not a better understanding, but will allow us to be more confident in making the findings. And so I think things of that nature are the real concern. I don't think any of the commissioners is necessarily opposed to the project, and I think we all understand the unique lot size and characteristics, and so, and that's why it's dictating you building this deck in the setback and needing the variance. We just like to make sure that we've sort of done our due diligence to make sure that we have the right type of information to support our findings if we were to approve the project as presented. And so, and in terms of the actual aesthetics of the project, I think, because right now it's sort of a blank plate, it seems like the major elements are basically just the actual deck railing and its assembly, and I guess any of the columns or posts for the deck. And so I don't think our design reviews have much guidelines in terms of decks, do they?
Not presently.
Yeah.
Not with what we have.
And so I guess I would just recommend just try to be as thoughtful in the design as possible, even though it's in the back of the yard and not very visible by the public. Just please try to make sure you put some thought into it rather than just sort of going through the motions. We always appreciate that. And in general, I personally would recommend, I guess, a wood railing and something that isn't necessarily visually a block or wall, so that we can have some kind of visual keys. And I don't know if the other commissioners disagree with me on that. That's just my own personal take. And so I guess beyond that, I don't know if there's any other thoughts that a commissioner has to help the applicants as they move forward.
But she looks like she,
You'd like to? Sure. If you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium.
Hi, I'm the other owner of the property. Our neighbor on Madison, which is the cream-colored house there, the house has essentially been vacant for 9 months. The owner lives in China, and her son is living elsewhere working. So I'm not sure how we could inquire about whether or not they would object to the design. So do you have any suggestions?
I mean,
You know, what I had thought is at least looking to see what the build-out is on the property and how much FAR do they have left.
You mean for the corner property and then the
Not
one?
necessarily the corner property, but the one,
The one on
neighboring one on Madison.
Quite a bit.
I mean, is it built out for the most part? And so then we don't have to necessarily worry about them expanding back, or maybe they have a setback issue in the back also.
We can check the county records for
and
footage.
thank you. And to address your question, ma'am, if you can't reach them, they're unreachable, that's fine.
Okay.
I mean, simply just telling us that you made some attempts to contact them and they didn't respond will be enough.
Okay.
And then I think the other part too that we were also as a commission were getting at too was, and maybe if you work with staff as you move forward, but just to present to us information about comparable properties so that we can basically, as I think the other owner mentioned, that there's a similar property next door that has a deck that goes to the property yard, so that we can have that also as information as we
It's
consider
the
it.
same house as ours, except that he added a story, and then he built out the deck further, so it's actually flipped, but it's the same floor plan. So,
When did he add the floor? Do you know?
it's been there ever since we moved in, so it's been there about 24 years. He's a contractor, so I don't know what the permitting situation was.
No, I think it's all good information. I think just, as I said, working with staff so that they can formalize that and put it in their staff
Okay,
report.
in the staff report?
And then we can also look at things like the FAR or the floor to area ratio of that house. And so if it's higher than yours, then that helps your case. And so, yeah, and just general information about the actual size of their deck, since we can't see it very well.
Yeah.
Will help us.
Okay, thank you.
It's interesting that her property on the report here is already at 60 FAR.
Oh, yeah.
If this one,
Yeah, their property is just below the .6, it's at about a .56, so I would venture to guess this is well in excess of the allowable FAR.
Yeah, somebody got a variance at some point, possibly.
Non-conforming use.
Yeah, or it's not conforming. So I guess with that, hopefully that will help you make some decisions and move forward with your project. And I wish you the best. Hopefully, maybe we'll see you again sometime. All right, with that, I'm going to close this item and move on to our next item, which is the call for review for planning application 16-033. Conditional use permit for Orange Theory Fitness at 1495 Solano Avenue.
So this is a new type of review for you in your process of reviewing projects. This is a previously approved conditional use permit, which you called for review to evaluate for compliance with the conditions of approval for Orange Theory Fitness on Solano Ave. The subject site is 8,313 square feet with a 6,411 square foot retail office mixed-use building with a parking garage below grade that was built in 1995. The applicant leases just over 3,100 square feet of ground level space for Orange Theory Fitness. The business offers instructional exercise classes for up to 24 participants at a time. There are 7 classes offered during the day, Monday through Friday, starting at 6 a.m. per Planning Commission condition. The last class is offered at 7:30 p.m., and the lower level garage provides 16 off-street parking spaces available for patrons. This is the street view as it exists today, and Orange Theory is located in this space over here. So the applicant received conditional use permit approval from the commission for this business on April 27th of last year, which limited the opening time to 6 a.m. Because of that, the applicant appealed the request to City Council, who upheld the commission decision and allowed for a 6-month check-in compliance report, at which time an earlier opening hour could be considered. However, as part of the conditions of approval, we include a standard condition that allows the commission to call projects for review for permit compliance at any time. So we brought this to you on June 28th, at which time you exercise special condition number 1, which allows you to call this for review to ensure compliance with project conditions. Just to give you some background, you have heard from an adjacent neighbor regarding noise concerns as part of public comment at different meetings throughout the past spring. The business commenced operation on Monday, April 10th of this year. These noise issues were quickly identified by the neighbor. In going through emails, I pieced together a very loose timeline. So following that opening commencement, Orange Theory, vis-a-vis email correspondence, indicated they had met with their design, construction, and engineering team to review noise issues. And then subsequent to that, they had a report from their acoustics engineer identifying some of the noise issues and potential mitigation. Based on what we know from the applicant, the following mitigation was implemented as part of this. Volume is controlled to a very specific level, and it's controlled by the corporation. So it's actually fixed within the space. There was a particular exercise that was problematic with noise generation, which was eliminated from the workouts. As part of this, they also included floor padding to mitigate the noise, and that was installed in June. And then, as I understand it, dumbbells have been removed from the business to further ameliorate the noise issues. As part of the packet, you received an acoustical report that was prepared by the applicant. They did some initial noise testing and site observations on April 20th of this year. They then put in these mitigation measures, went back and took measurements later in June, and also from the adjacent resident's home who had expressed the concerns about noise. Based on the report from the acoustical engineer, the recorded decibel levels are within the allowances of the city's noise ordinance, and that is contained in Chapter 8.1 of the Albany Municipal Code. And so with that, we recommend that you review the use permit and applicant submitted materials and make a determination regarding compliance with the project findings and conditions of approval. If the commission concludes that the permit is in compliance, then no action is required. Should you conclude that it is out of compliance, revocation is the next step, and you would have to make a motion directing staff to prepare findings of denial for future review. One thing to note, you did receive a letter via email today. It's in the binder at the back of the room as well from Orange Theory's local legal counsel. And with that, I have several speaker cards, which we can get to, but I think Orange Theory, their attorney, and their acoustical engineer are here, as well as concerned parties who would like to address the commission.
Okay. Are there any questions or clarifications needed from staff for this project? Or item, I should say. No? Okay. Okay, with that, I will ask if the applicant or the applicant's representative would like to address the commission.
Good evening. My name is Brian Winter. I'm a land use attorney at Miller Star Regalia in Walnut Creek, and I'm Orange Theory's land use counsel. And I submitted a letter this morning, and I apologize for that being late, but given the fact that I was hired on Monday with the hurricane, this was the earliest that I could get it in. But I believe it's straightforward. These issues are straightforward. The letter is straightforward. In this case, given the fact that the city approved Orange Theory's conditional use permit last year, and Orange Theory expended substantial sums in reliance on that permit to open the business and operate it. At this point, they have what is considered by the courts to be a fundamental vested right. They have a highly protected use, in essence, at this point, and in the absence of substantial evidence in the record that they are not complying with the conditions of approval, or that they're violating them, or that they're creating some sort of a nuisance, they have a right to continue operating in this location pursuant to that use permit without change to the permit or without revocation of the permit. Orange Theory has gone to substantial lengths to address the concerns of the neighbor that is expressing concerns about the project. And in essence, what those concerns amount to is to request that there be no noise at all coming from Orange Theory to his property. But of course, that is probably not possible. It's certainly not the legal standard. But even though that's the case, Orange Theory has gone to substantial lengths to try to mitigate the problems as he perceives them and make them better, installing additional padding in the flooring, seals around the doors, eliminating or modifying substantially the program that they offer worldwide in 600 some locations. And doing all of that has actually substantially impaired their business in this location. And they're not actually required to do that, given that they're so far below the applicable noise standards in this case. So we do have Rory Ellis, Orange Theory's Director of Design and Construction here, along with Paul Baller, the acoustical engineer who prepared the report. And in this case, that's the only evidence in the record on this subject as it's analyzed against the city's noise ordinance, and it shows that Orange Theory is orders of magnitude below what could actually occur in this location. Orange Theory has been a good neighbor, will continue to be a good neighbor, and we would request that the commission not take any action tonight at all, determine that Orange Theory is in compliance with the permit, and allow it to continue operating its business. I'm happy to answer any questions along with our team here this evening.
Okay, great, thanks. Are there any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Kent?
The noise report was done after the padding and the seals?
I think I should have the acoustical engineer speak to that and address those issues, but their measurements were taken at 2 different points in time, but he would be best to answer those technical questions.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Paul Ballard with Ballard Acoustical Consultants, and my office is in Loomis, California, and I've filled out a speaker card. So I've actually been to the site. We originally did the noise analysis before they even opened. Originally, there were windows on the back of the building that faced the neighbor's property. We said, fill those in, seal around the door, make these changes, and upon opening, there were some concerns that were expressed by the neighbors. We immediately went out to the site. I discovered that the perimeter seal around the door was insufficient to provide the kind of noise reduction we were looking for. I've done measurements out there on about 4 occasions. The letter that you have really quantifies the last 2 occasions. But in all cases, the noise levels, our findings have been that there's a substantial background noise from traffic and BART pass-bys and what have you out there, but that the noise generated by Orange Theory, audible initially, has been steadily reduced over time. In the most recent set of noise measurements we did, the padding was included. And the modifications that were referred to by the attorney were implemented. And our findings from doing measurements both on the deck immediately adjacent to the neighbor's property, as well as with their permission inside of their residence, show that the noise levels from Orange Theory, while still occasionally audible, very, very faint, but occasionally audible, are well within compliance with your city's noise ordinance by a fairly wide margin. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
What was the decibel reading inside the residence?
With the windows in the open position, we measured levels of 40 decibels, and that was when we intentionally dropped items inside Orange Theory so that we could create enough noise to measure it. When the items were not being dropped, the level in the residence with the window open was 39. So it was a 1 decibel change in the maximum noise levels that were registered. Per your ordinance, the interior noise level maximum standard is 60, so they were a full 20 decibels below the noise ordinance limit, even with the window open. We tested with the window closed as well, and the levels dropped to 30, and at that point, we couldn't detect any sound at all from, even when the weights were being dropped.
And is that an average decibel, or is that just a?
That's an individual maximum noise level. The averages would be much lower because the sound is for the large part inaudible, only occasionally faintly audible.
And do you recall what the sound was before you did all the improvements? Do you recall?
Our preliminary test results indicated that that the noise levels were also in compliance, but due to the audibility of the weights being dropped, it was Orange Theory's position that, hey, we need to do some things about this to improve it, despite being in compliance, and I agreed with that. And have worked with Orange Theory to try and implement these additional seals and padding measures to try and minimize this to the maximum extent.
One more. What is that padding? It's like what is it? Just
well, it's a heavy urethane. Rory would probably be better at answering this question, if you don't mind, if I defer that to him.
My name is Rory Ellis. I'm the Director of Design Construction for Orange Theory Corporate. The initial flooring we put in there was 2 7/8. It's Genimat Fit 70 is the actual product.
2 7/8 inches or centimeters?
Inches.
Inches. Okay.
We since, after the initial findings, I flew out here. I felt the thud. It was there. Since then, we put a 10 millimeter crucible underlayment, in addition of an inch and a half, or excuse me, another 2 inches thick rubber flooring that has isolation pads that it's almost like round discs on the bottom of it, so it's just not rolled and laid down, so it's isolated off the ground. It gives it more of a chamber in there to stop the sound from transferring out. So we have about a little over 4 inches from the top of the subfloor to the top of our rubber floor in the workout area. It ramps up. So if you go in our space, you'll see 3 different levels of flooring. Where we have the workout room is the highest, which is where we focused everything on.
Thank you.
And then I have actually a question for the acoustical engineer. And so if you could just explain to me, when I'm looking at Table 2 in your report that we received, and under the L50 category, if I understand correctly, the nighttime criteria threshold is 50, versus I see several points where it's over 50, where I see like 51, 56, 54, 53, 52.
That's correct.
And so am I correct in understanding that at those moments, the sound level did exceed the?
It exceeded your ordinance standard, but as I noted in the letter, the noise sources that were responsible for those exceedances were local and not related to Orange Theory, be them garbage collection or vehicle pass-bys or a BART pass-by.
Okay.
Or what have you. And your ordinance actually allows you, in cases where ambient noise levels are already elevated, to increase your noise ordinance thresholds in those cases in 5 decibel increments. To be conservative, we didn't do that. We just applied them exactly as they are, even though the ambient conditions might suggest that the noise standards out there would appropriately be increased.
Okay. And then, and I'm assuming like when you're doing this testing or collecting this data, and you have the microphone set up outside on the back porch and of Orange Theory Fitness, and the noise level raises to 56. It's just a matter of you saying like, oh, the BART train is going by right now while that happens, so that must be A cause B sort of thing?
That's correct. It was a combination of observations and doing recordings and analysis of the data. But in watching the sound level meter, you might just faintly hear the voice of the coach, but not see any change in the decibel levels whatsoever relative to the background levels. So we were able to conclude that the levels generated by the Orange Theory were in fact below all of your categories of noise level standards. Your standards permit more noise to be generated if it's generated for a shorter period of time. So under each of the categories, we concluded that Orange Theory was in compliance with all of them.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Can you, so this same table, Table 2, it says April 20th. This was before or after the mitigations that were put in?
This was in April,
test.
so this was prior to even the most recent mitigation being implemented. The measurements that we conducted inside of the residence were after the additional padding, which Rory alluded to, was installed. These measurements were after they had made improvements to the perimeter seals around the doors, but before the addition of the extra rubber. So there's actually even more mitigation in place than is reflected by this table currently.
So we post-mitigation, we don't have a similar table to this. The closest thing we have is actually in the residence, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then, so I'm just trying to understand the baseline noise level. Is the closest thing we have the 550 or 555? Because the monitor is outside of the building, right?
That's correct.
So can I read from this that 51 decibels under L50 is the background noise at 550, approximately?
That's exactly what you can infer, because there were no activities occurring within Orange Theory prior to 6 a.m. And so for that 10-minute period, we had an L50 of 51 when there was zero noise being generated inside of Orange Theory. Also, similarly, after the class ended from the 7 o'clock to the 7:10 period, the levels were also 52, 51. So you can see there were periods when class was in session where the levels were in the 49 range. There was a 56 and a 54 measured, but again, those were caused by other sources that caused that level to go up. So the most difficult one to ascertain compliance would be the L50, which is your median noise level standard. But that's for a noise source which is present 30 minutes out of the hour, the 50 being 50% of the hour. And the Orange Theory noise is audible only very brief periods. So there is a question as to whether or not your L50 standards would even apply to this project, because the noise source isn't present for 30 minutes out of an hour, for example.
Okay. Are there any other questions or clarifications of the applicant? No. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
And with that, I will now turn to the public comment period and ask if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to address the commission.
David Garner has filled out a speaker card.
Thank you.
Okay, Rory and I have gotten to know one another quite well over the last 6 months. I've got a stack of emails that I've sent to him about the noise. The thuds have stopped. I'm not denying that, okay? They've been greatly, greatly reduced to your efforts, okay? And then I'll address you about what our rights are as a homeowner, okay? But the noise problem now is it continues to wake up my wife and my daughter because of the instructors being too loud. And when I tried to call the manager, I never got a return call, which is not good business, by the way, for anybody. Now, let me just set the tone a little bit we moved into that house in 1992 before this building was built. We moved there for the schools in Albany. We raised 3 kids. No problems. It was a nice, quiet neighborhood. The auto shop moved out, which is now Fonda's. The Sweat moved out. We approved the building, but it's really been poorly managed lately. Nobody takes care of the outside. There's trash everywhere. There's just litter. Nobody picks it up. None of the employees do. There's runaway dumpsters, garbage dumpsters. There's dumpsters on the street. It's not a good situation. And then to have a noise situation, it's a quality of life thing. I go to work at 4:30 every morning, so I sleep early at night. My wife and daughter are the ones who have to put up with the noise, okay? And I'd like to see what kind of city this is. Do they side with business, or do they side with the families that live here?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Okay, so I am the one who lives in that room right next to Orange Theory Fitness, I guess, the building. And I am definitely, I've noticed that the efforts that they've put in have really significantly lowered the noise that I hear. And probably for 2 months, I didn't hear anything, and it was fine. However, this past month, I've been woken up a few times a week probably by instructors. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's a boy or a girl. It's either a girl or a guy with a high-pitched voice. And I just hear okay, 3, 2, 1, okay. And I can take the class in my room. That's how much I hear it. And then I don't hear the dumbbells anymore. I know that they were taken out from the classes. But I was woken up probably twice by just vibrations in my room that were coming from that building. My room is, where I sleep is probably less than 20 feet from where the classes are being held. So every little vibration goes through the walls and I can feel it. Also, I remember you, Paul, you came into my room and took the noise levels. I do believe that we waited until there was like barely any noise outside. I know that there was a garbage truck, and so we were like, okay, let's stop and listen while there's no noise. And it still came to 40 decibels, and there's, 60 is allowed. And I don't know, I appreciate a quiet home. I know that there's obviously like noise coming from the outside. There's regular day-to-day, and that's fine. During the day, that's fine, but being woken up at 6 in the morning, like it's dead quiet outside, and then you hear an instructor. And even if it's well below the city, what the city allows, if you hear, like at 6 in the morning, if nothing else is making noise, I'm gonna hear what's right next to me, even if it's pretty quiet. There was no noise before because it was an office space, and now I hear a class. And so even if it's quiet, it's still waking me up, and that's the problem that I have. I remember specifically at 6:15 in the morning, I heard an instructor, and I was like, okay, maybe they just like set the volume a little bit too high, like I'm not like gonna make a big deal out of it, I'm just gonna go back to sleep. And then at 7:30, again, I heard a different instructor the same day, and I was like, okay, well, my day, I have to wake up now. So, okay, that's it, thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the commission?
I go to classes also in the morning. I go to jazzercise. They don't allow them on Solano in the church. They don't allow the classes before 7 o'clock in the morning. I do hear you guys. I do hear you. At 6 or 5 in the morning this week, twice. So if I'm awake and I hear it, it's not okay. I know that you checked. I know that you tried everything that you can, and I appreciate because it's much better. 6 o'clock in the morning, you didn't come to the house to hear the noise level, so there's a difference.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have somebody else.
Shannon Nakabayashi.
So my name is Shannon Nakabayashi. I live at 826 Curtis, so I live a few blocks down from my neighbors. And I respect my neighbors greatly, and I definitely respect their efforts to make this a quiet neighborhood. I agree. And one thing I did want to come up and say to you is that this is not a quiet neighborhood. It is a very noisy neighborhood. And definitely there are a lot of issues with a lot of the businesses. But I'm also an Orange Theory customer. They did not ask me to come. I came of my own volition just because I've seen all the efforts that they made. And it seems like the waits are no longer the effort. I don't live in my neighbor's house. I don't know what they hear, so I can't speak to that. But I can tell you in general what the nuisance level is in the neighborhood. I am an attorney. I work at home. And this business has really been nothing but wonderful, as far as I'm concerned. Fonda, other businesses are just making my life terrible on a daily basis. Safeway, their customers make life very difficult for me. So, like I said, I don't know. I don't have the first-hand knowledge. It would be hearsay for me to say, what the gardeners are going through. But I do know that, and I am here to support this business because, in my perspective, from the neighborhood at large, they have been very good neighbors. And I do want to make sure that if we are going to enforce the noise ordinance, that we do it consistently and that we don't penalize the one business that, at least from my perspective, my limited perspective, is actually trying really hard to comply, unlike the other businesses in the neighborhood, which really could care less about us neighbors. So, thank you.
Thank you. Sure, please make a quick comment.
Our intent is not to do any harm to any business. I'm a small business owner as well, and I understand. But when you're in a neighborhood business, I have an office in downtown financial district. When you're in a neighborhood, you've got to keep what's going on in focus. okay? Last time I talked to somebody, when you wanted to get a permit, excuse me for pointing, your representative said you won't even know we're there. That's exactly what he said, Rory. Okay, I took him for his word.
Mr. Garner, not to interrupt you, but if you wouldn't mind addressing the commission rather than the
You're right.
audience.
So anyway, we have no intention of doing any harm to any business. They put a lot of money in it. We appreciate all the efforts they've done, but it would be nice to have somebody that replied to emails. It'd be nice to be able to talk to somebody over at Orange Theory Fitness, because at night, I don't know what time they finish their classes. They're supposed to start at 7:30, but at 9:15, they're stacking. Whatever they're stacking, they're throwing. It's not gentle, and you could hear that pretty loud. Now, it's not somebody's voice, but they're stacking the mats or whatever they're doing. They're not two people carrying them and putting them over there. They're tossing. That's annoying, okay? So again, it's just a matter of they got to fine-tune the instructors' volume to keep it down. As far as I'm concerned, that's it. But again, I don't get woken up in the morning. I'm already gone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, please. Come on.
Dave and I have responded hundreds of times, so to any suggestion that I don't reply to emails is it's inaccurate, and is copied on 100% of those, so I'm sure there's a record there to show our compliance. I'm the only one in the world who can control the sound at Orange Theory Fitness in Albany. We haven't turned it up 1 decibel in 3 months. It hasn't happened. I have to fly here from Boca Raton in order to turn it up. I've done that 3 times in the last 3 months to fine tune it, to get it to where they weren't hearing it. If somehow it worked for 3 months and now all of a sudden it's not, I don't, maybe the wind's blowing a different direction, I'm not sure, but I can guarantee you, and I have proof that I can guarantee you, it's never been turned up. It hasn't. In fact, it's the lowest sound system in the entire world for Orange Theory Fitness. We have over 750 studios. There isn't one studio in the world that has a lower volume than this one. We've done everything that we can. Our business is hemorrhaging. We're losing employees, we're losing coaches, we're losing hundreds, literally hundreds of members and thousands of dollars at this point, because we've modified our workout to the point where we're not our business anymore, and we can't do anything else to the detriment of potentially closing our business. We've never closed an Orange Theory Fitness, and we don't want this to be the very first one. We love it here. We want to continue to be here, and we believe that we're well within the rights that were given to us, and we kind of have science to prove that. So,
I'm curious if you could just expand a little bit on. You said how you've modified your workouts to accommodate this, and so I'm assuming that's exclusive of the physical modifications to the store. Could you just kind of describe what some of those modifications are?
Yeah, up until 2 weeks ago, we completely eliminated all dumbbell use, which is a third of our workout. So we're a facility that uses interval training between a rower, a treadmill, and weights. We've completely taken all of the weights away. So we're only doing body weight exercises. Further, beyond that, we've eliminated all jumping exercises, such as burpees or jump squats. We've eliminated anything that could potentially touch the ground, like a sumo squat. If you had a Bosu ball or a medicine ball in your hand, it would touch the ground. We've eliminated all of that. Meanwhile, if you wake up and you're in Fort Lauderdale, San Diego, Hong Kong, Singapore, New York City, you're doing the same workout. Not in Albany. You're doing a much modified workout. And we've lost members because of that. We've lost coaches because of that, because coaches want to teach. They want to put what their education is and coach and teach members how to work out. We've taken a third of that workout away from them. And we've put dumbbells back in. I don't think anybody here knows, but we put dumbbells back in. And we changed the dumbbells we use. But the only dumbbells in the world that are hex head are for Orange Theory Fitness or here in Albany. We've had 0 issues with that, so we think we've solved that problem through the added layers of rubber, through seals, and through we still have even with the new dumbbells, we still have modifications. All of our workouts, you could see the workout via video monitors. So you see a model up there demoing. This studio doesn't get that because we have to hand write them all because they're all modified. This is literally I work in Boca Raton, Florida. My office is right next to the fitness facility team who writes all the workouts. And every day, they're in there writing workouts for the rest of the world, and then they write the workout for Albany. And we send them out every week.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
One question. Why can't you let somebody else adjust the sound? Seems
I
like
don't trust anybody else. This is too important of a situation for us that I took complete control of the situation. Truth be told, we have coaches who think it's a rock concert and they'll crank it up. So I took the ability of one person's personal opinion on what's loud and what isn't loud away and controlled it myself.
So you don't do that for all Orange Fitnesses?
We put a decibel limiter on every Orange Theory Fitness that they cannot exceed, and that's at 90. Here, we're well below that. That's inside the studio. Here, I forget what the last testing was, but we're well, in the upper 70s, low 80s inside for the music. And even still, so no one can go in and turn it above that. We have to have a special computer come in and hook up to the processor and actually raise the decibel levels per studio. And that laptop resides in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, in my home.
And just one question about the modifications. I'm curious because most of what I've been hearing about the complaints have been getting woken up at 6 in the morning. Is there a way to? I mean, are there concerns about doing these exercises other times of day? Were you just trying to be so conservative that you?
Every studio in the world opens at 5:30, but Albany is the only one that opens at 6:30. So we feel like we've done that. That was part of the original CUP approval process. And full disclosure, we screwed up the first couple of days. I think the first day and opened up at 5:30 is because that's our business model. We slapped the people who did it on the hand, and we're back to 6:30. Closing up more classes isn't something that we'd be able to.
No. What I'm asking is the opposite. I'm curious why you've eliminated all of the exercises throughout. It sounds like throughout the entire day, throughout all of your classes, instead of just focusing on the.
I have upwards of 100 emails that show issues from the gardeners at various points.
Various points of the day. Okay.
And we want it to be simple because if I go to class at 6:30 in the morning, but tomorrow I go to class at 10:30, I want it to be the same feel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna make it even for everybody, not just for one time period.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, you'd like to respond?
Just wanted to underscore, you've heard quite clearly, I think, from both sides how Orange Theory has gone above and beyond to be a good neighbor, to do everything really that it can do to minimize impacts. And it's unfortunate that there's this tension in this particular location. And I understand, as a homeowner, I understand the notion of not having any impacts from the outside world. But it's a modern society. Orange Theory is operating a vibrant business. They're trying to do a great job worldwide and in this location. We're in a proceeding at this point where Orange Theory has a conditional use permit that is potentially on the line. And I would just encourage the commission, and I say this with all the respect that I can muster, to focus on the law in this instance and the evidence in the record that is relevant to this issue, and that is that Orange Theory is unambiguously, there is no argument that it is not in compliance fully with its use permit, and that it has a legal right to continue operating in this location with the use permit as it was originally approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to address the commission, please? And if you haven't, after you speak, if you could fill out a speaker card, be appreciated. You can do that after you speak.
Hi, my name is Tapasha Bush. I'm actually a member at the facility, so I feel like on their behalf, I can kind of speak about what goes on in there. I've been a member for about over a month. When I first came there, I felt like it's a little too quiet. Because I'm used to gyms or certain studios being very loud. I will say this, that a lot of the instructors, the classes are a lot smaller, and a lot of the instructors, they do instruct you on a noise level. There are no mats or anything being thrown around. Like tonight, we had a class, it was only 4 of us there. It's pretty too quiet. That makes me nervous because I'm used to a lot of noise, and sometimes when we do have the instructors, they don't use the mic. They may talk, especially if they're smaller classes. So I've been there for a past month, and maybe twice there's been just a little bigger of a class, but not really. They've definitely reduced some. I can tell that there's not a lot of people that do come there. So I don't know. I can't speak for the neighbors because I don't live, at their residence. I don't know what they go through, but I feel like this is a very accommodating facility, and you can tell with a lot of the instructors, including the staff that works there, they really do a good job with trying to control any type of noise level. And I know it may sound selfish for me to say this, but when you go to gyms or when you have, usually there is some type of noise. I feel like long as it's not over a certain limit, if the city approves it, I feel like it's okay. I feel like they have been very good with, trying to do all these changes, and a lot of places don't. I also am in the medical field. I used to practice over near that area, and it's always been a little bit loud or whatever. There's a lot, they're kind of faced out on a very busy street, so there's always a lot of stuff, going on. But that's all I wanted to say, so that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to address the commission? Sure. And as always, if you haven't filled out a speaker card, if you can, afterwards, that'd be appreciated.
I am Raul Chinchilla. I'm a resident of Albany, live on Keynes, pretty busy street there, and I came to Albany around 2006 with my kids, went to school. I'm also a member of Orange Theory, and I actually have started with Orange Theory when they opened. They've been very accommodating. I've seen all the changes that they've gone through to try to address the issues. The instructors have always, at various different times when I've gone, have always made it a point to recognize the noise level, have worked with with us to accommodate the noise level. So, I've gotten used to living. I live on Keynes. San Pablo borders is the other side of Keynes. So the noise level there is always high. I mean, it's an adjustment for me from where I used to live, but I think you can see that all along Solano Avenue. I don't know what what the other residents in the surrounding areas near Solano Avenue have to say about noise levels of the people that have their businesses there, but I think they've done everything possible to address it, and I just want to let you guys know that I enjoy working out like that. I enjoy the professionalism that they've given to addressing the problem. So I support what they do.
Okay, thank you. And is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to address the commission? Please come up. This will be your final one.
Totally fine. I just wanted to come up because I don't want you guys to feel like, I don't want it to come off as like we don't want them there. I actually, little fun fact, when I first heard that they were thinking of building a gym right next to my house, I was like, good, I don't have to drive or walk or go to the YMCA, and now I can actually go somewhere right next to my house. Like, how convenient. I think the main issue was just always like the noise at 6 in the morning. And also, I don't know if I heard correctly that the dumbbells were put back in the past 2 weeks. Were they put back into the classes, or just like you're thinking of putting them back? Okay, so I think that's when I was talking earlier that I've been woken up a few times. Recently, that was the vibration that I was hearing, or I was feeling when I was woken up early. But again, I don't want, like, I go to classes, I go to the gym, I know that, and I appreciate everything that Orange Theory Fitness has been doing to work with us. I don't want to see like anything bad happen to their business. It's just I want to like express how it feels to be living there, and there is a lot of noise where I live, but not that early in the morning. So that's what wakes me up. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. And is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to address? I think that's everybody. And so with that, I'm going to close the public comment period and bring it back to the commission for a full discussion and possible vote. Is there,
I was hoping Ann could just clarify a couple. I was going back through the conditions of approval, and two of them, if you could just clarify, there's SP8 and SP11, and SP8 was that there would be a compliance report 6 months after operations. Does this serve as that compliance report, or do we need to expect something else?
There could be another compliance report. This wasn't intended to serve as that, since this was exercised as the call for review. We haven't actually done a complete compliance report with, study of how the conditions have been adhered to.
Okay.
and would that, I'm curious, would that compliance report include, similarly as Orange Theory Fitness had done, a third party testing the auditory levels of it?
I don't think that we had included that specificity in the condition, and I don't believe we, certainly at the staff level, we don't have the resources to cover the cost for that.
Okay, thank you.
The other item that was in there was SP11, which said kind of within the time frame of the 6-month compliance report, if there were no complaints, we can consider changing it to a 5:30 start.
Right, and that was actually the intent behind the 6-month check. And when the council looked at this as part of the appeal, they wanted to build that in there so that if this had gone smoothly, the business, it could be delegated to the commission to adjust the operating hours to 5:30.
So it sounds like we're not going to take that on now, but later?
Right, that's not part of the discussion tonight.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions, thoughts, comments from the commission? Commissioner?
I can share my comments, which will be brief. And I'm very sympathetic to the experience of living next to what you consider to be a nuisance. I mean, we have a little tiny yippy dog that lives next door that barks at all hours, and it makes me absolutely crazy. And I mean, I know it's different, but it's we've all had experiences like this, and I want you to know that I'm personally very sympathetic to it. But I do think that, the way that people experience noise is inherently subjective. What is, what will wake someone up early in the morning is, other people can sleep through, and what is a nuisance type noise to one person is just like background to another person. And it's because noise is experienced so subjectively, I think it makes it especially important to stick to the objective standards that our community has set for, for what is acceptable, especially in a commercial residential interface, and to really apply those standards consistently. And the only evidence we have heard, objective evidence we've heard, is that not only is the business owner doing everything they can reasonably to mitigate the noise impact, but that they're well within what the city allows. We frankly, as the attorney pointed out, we don't have any substantial evidence in the record that indicates that there is a violation of any of the conditions of approval. And I frankly see no basis to impose additional conditions at this time, much less initiate the process to revoke the CUP.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from commissioners?
I guess I'm generally with agreement with the commissioner. I am also sympathetic to you guys being a neighbor and having issues and not being able to sleep. But I mean, we as a commission also want to kind of see more investment on Solano Avenue, and so we're going to have to struggle with this on future projects. But unless there's additional information that's generated, on this noise issue, we kind of have to go with what's in front of us, it seems to me.
Commissioner Kent, do you have any?
Sorry, I mean, it does sound like you have made some progress to kind of address their concerns, and so that's very much appreciated. I'm just throwing this out there. I mean, one thing you may want to consider is, it sounds like most of the problems are in the morning on their bedroom. I mean, can their windows be replaced? I don't know if they're new modern windows that have some noise reduction ability, but it's something to think about. It's not something we can enforce on you, but it's something to think about.
Thank you. Commissioner Kent, do you have anything you'd like to add to the discussion?
Yeah, I think what Megan was, Commissioner Megan.
Commissioner Megan.
There's some, I mean, I really hate meetings where people are doing this, you know, and it's not a big noise, but it's a repeated noise, it just drive you crazy. So it sometimes is a noise that's even, you pick it out amongst all others, and it's something that's working on you, and it's hard now that you focus on it to get rid of. So it's a very subjective thing and difficult to deal with. And I'm not surprised that the noise study showed that it wasn't over the rate. But, you know, even 50 decibels is within the accepted category, but a conversation is 50 decibels. So that's, having somebody in your bedroom talking is going to keep you awake. So obviously, it's at the level where it's going to keep you up, even though it's technically within the, below the statute. And we know that's not all coming from the gym, it's coming from other things. Some things kind of jumped out at me that it went quiet for a while, and then it started getting quiet for a while, and you have the microphone on, it hasn't changed, but maybe the instructor has changed. And if you have a louder voice or you yell louder, that's going to make difference, right? So maybe the instructor gets over enthusiastic or has a voice that penetrates more than others. You know, there's those kinds of variables that aren't really considered in the study that might have an effect on the neighbors. It does sound like there's a little bit of obliviousness with, well, that's what I got the sense of when Mr. Garner was speaking about the way the building's being maintained and the trash and dumpsters, and that's been brought up before. But then when you spoke about your employees and how they all been trained, that was, and some of the members spoke to that too. That was refreshing to hear. I wasn't sure why you needed a mic. I guess it kind of gets the adrenaline going and everybody's pumped, but do you really need a mic when you have 15 people? You do? Oh. So it's kind of a big thing, all right. And then the other part of it was it's really where residential use hits commercial use. You're right on that line. And so there's inherent that this conflict is going to happen right there. And so it's a difficult thing. It happens, as one of the what other members mentioned, we have with parking a lot. People who have residential houses right next to commercial are always complaining about parking. Well, it's kind of, the commercial needs that parking to survive. And it's really a nature of the location of the house. And so that's kind of the issue here. The commercial is going to be noisy, and the house is right next to it. And then I fall back on the last statement, exactly what Val said. Maybe now it's falling on the residents to change the windows or do something on your end, even a screen or something, so you don't. I know that vegetation doesn't block sound, but it is a psychological separation that can help. I know that's. Yeah, I guess.
There's no questions about it. First of all, we have a double window.
Well, I mean, that's a good point.
And
Yeah.
I'm thinking when you're sleeping,
I think this, I'm going to actually interrupt everybody, and that I understand that some of the members in the audience are very emotionally invested in this, obviously because it's your home. And I'm going to let Commissioner Kent continue, but we have closed the public comment period. And also, if you would like to formally sort of address something, I would ask that you come up to the mic when you do that.
You're right. Well, to address that issue, if the windows are closed and they're double pane windows, I don't know what kind of windows you have. It's obviously going to be quieter than when the windows are open. When the windows are open, you're going to get whatever noise comes in, the BART tracks and everything else. So, yeah, that was one other statement, and I kind of forgot what it was.
If you like, I'll add my 2 cents and feel free to chime in any moment you like.
Okay.
So I'll just say that I am quite honestly sympathetic to both sides of this issue. I live in a condominium building with 12 units. I had a neighbor who lived directly below me who was hearing impaired and liked to listen to their TV at very high volumes late at night, and then would fall asleep with the volume on the TV on, which was very frustrating and And so I understand where you're coming from in terms of it affecting your quality of life. And then on the flip side, I also, you guys getting kind of a weird look at my life, I also like to exercise in the morning in my condominium unit, and I've had doing calisthenic routines, and I've had my neighbors complain of the noise I've created, and also of the shaking of the walls from me jumping and doing exercise like burpees in my unit. And so I've had to modify my routine, similarly to what you were just describing, to a point where I've turned down the volume quite low on my TV, and I do it in only very limited locations of my unit, so that where I know it's structurally sound, it won't shake any walls. And it's frustrating, but at the same time, I do it out of an effort to try to work with my neighbors and come up with a compromise so that neither of our priorities are considered primary or more important than the others, but we try to work together. And so I hope that that's what can come of this meeting. And so to that effect, I will say that I appreciate that Orange Theory Fitness has made modifications, both structurally to the facility and to how they operate or do their exercise routines. One thought I will say is that I know it's probably a big inconvenience to remove the weight training, but I think if that will really help mitigate one of the major concerns, as I understand it from members in the audience, I would maybe suggest that you consider continuing that prohibition of the weight training. And then also I'd just like to say that it's unfortunate that this situation kind of represents one of the primary problems in Albany, where we have the intersection of our commercial district and our residential district right next to each other. And when I was at I went to your property to kind of look at it, and I mean, the wall of your bedroom windows that has the windows is literally about 4 feet away from the deck that's behind Orange Theory Fitness, so it is in very close proximity. And I will say that although you haven't had this problem at all of your other worldwide facilities, I would guess that they don't all have the same specific physical characteristics that this location does in terms of its proximity to residential neighbors. And so I think it makes it a little bit unique from those. And so I don't like to sort of generalize and lump it into that category. And so that being said, though, I do agree with what the other commissioners have said in terms of, I think, unfortunately, what we have is the objective record to go on. And if we don't try to stay within the objective data as a reference point, it can become very subjective and hard to define and create a datum that we can apply to everybody. And then furthermore, I would just say I would like to have seen a report with data after all the mitigation measures have been done. And I would never accuse collusion or anything like that of a professional, but I guess I would have liked to have seen a third-party analysis done by somebody hired by the city rather than the defendant, if you will, for lack of better terms, just because of things like, not that I am accusing you of this, but Orange Theory, knowing that the data collection representative is coming, they could have told their instructors to sort of quiet their voices that day to help the results. Again, not that I'm accusing that of occurring. I just think it would be nice to have sort of safeguards to help ensure that that doesn't happen. But that being said, all we really have right now is the noise survey results provided by the third-party acoustical engineer hired by Orange Theory Fitness, and their data, assuming we take it for being correct and true, shows that they didn't exceed the noise levels except for the addition of ambient sort of outside noises contributing to it. And so, I mean, with that, it's I am having trouble approving I'm having a tough time coming to the point of revoking Orange Theory Fitness's conditional use permit.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to add, when we approved this, what is it, 6 months ago, 9 months ago? When we were presented it, it was, Orange Fitness said that they would soundproof the building and it wouldn't disturb the neighbors. So that was a fundamental statement that helped us approve it. So we can't let that not go unsaid, that, you're complying with the city's noise ordinance, and that's enough. It's not quite enough, so I'm glad to see that you're going further with it.
So, I mean, with that being said, unless there are any other thoughts a commissioner would like to add to the discussion, I'm open for a motion on this item.
You actually don't have to make a motion.
Oh, okay.
If you determine that this is still in compliance, there's no action.
Okay. I mean, well, I guess we need to somehow determine that, so if we do a vote to see if...
Yeah, I don't know what the proper procedure is here, but I would like to propose that we...
You can make a motion just to say that
Yeah. How about this? I will, as chair, make a motion purely just for procedural reasons to do a survey of the commission to see if I'm making a motion to find Orange Theory Fitness within, or was it?
In compliance.
In compliance with the Albany noise ordinances and regulations.
Can I just ask, so does that commit us to anything with a decision down the road about a 5:30 opening?
No, that would be handled completely independently of this.
So even if we find them in compliance, that doesn't...
Right, that wouldn't trigger their ability to have a 5:30 opening.
Thank you.
And I guess, and before I open for a second, excuse me, I guess I would again just, really strongly advise, I know it affects your business poorly, but to consider either eliminating the weight training or at least prohibiting it, and I know this is tough, but prohibiting it within the first, 6 to 7 a.m. and try to make it more of something that you do at the other parts of the day when it's not as big of concern, if you are going to proceed with including it in your program. And I don't know, anything you can do. I appreciate that you've been accommodating and trying to work with the neighbor, but anything you can do is always appreciated by the commission.
Yeah, I think we don't want this to sound like, okay, you're in compliance with the noise ordinance, good enough. I mean, just continue to do what you can to help resolve the situation, even though it's still within the noise ordinance.
Yes. And so, so there's been a motion to find Orange Theory Fitness in compliance with the city zoning regulations. Is there a second?
I'm seconding everything tonight.
Okay, all right, I love it. So there's been a motion and a second. All those who agree, say aye.
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 Okay, so we found Orange Theory Fitness in compliance, and we are moving on to the next item.
So we are on to the last item of the evening. We're going from exercise to marijuana.
Appropriate in that order. I'm surprised no one's here for this matter.
I'm actually really surprised. I thought we'd have a big house.
So just to give you some background, I'll start with kind of the high-level background. You, I'm sure, are all aware that Proposition 64 passed on the...
You going to give us the whole presentation they did City Council?
I'll give you snippets of it.
Oh, what am I, chopped liver here? Come on. All right, go ahead.
I'll just give you a little bit of background and kind of let you know where the council landed on this issue and what they expect to see in the future. But in a nutshell, Proposition 64 passed. And with that, the state is gearing up to do licensing of recreational cultivation and dispensaries. That's not going to go into effect until January 1, and the intent behind that is it's twofold: for them to get their regulatory procedures in place, and also for jurisdictions within the state of California to establish regulations either allowing or prohibiting recreational marijuana dispensaries and cultivation, and having that within their local regulations. So this has twice gone to City Council, once in April and once again in June. And in June, they adopted Resolution 2017-16, which is a resolution of intention directing the Planning and Zoning Commission to review and craft recommendations to amend regulations related to marijuana policies. So we have included a draft resolution for you tonight based on the red line changes that we've made to the code. The council, in their discussion, I think I heard you say earlier on that you watched some of the videos, because they were rather extensive conversations that we've condensed. But in a nutshell, through the 2 meetings, they ultimately came to the conclusion to continue the existing ban on medical marijuana dispensaries and to extend that to recreational dispensaries and commercial cultivation. So to give you some additional background, in 2007, following the approval of an advisory measure, City Council enacted medical marijuana dispensary regulations. This established a conditional use permitting process to allow 1 medical dispensary within specific zones in Albany. Over those years, it proved to be quite challenging to satisfy distance requirements, distance from schools, churches, that sort of thing.
Can I interrupt you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, when they were considering that and locating that 1 dispensary in specific zones, did that include a zone along Cleveland Avenue?
I think it did. I believe it did. I know the applications that were filed, I believe there was one on Solano and one on San Pablo, and those did not play out well.
And I'm just asking because Cleveland is sort of
It's a little more
void of
isolated from
schools and-
residential.
Near a park was one of the issues.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and the new upcoming park.
So as a result of some case law, in 2011, the City Council adopted an urgency ordinance prohibiting medical marijuana establishments within the city limits. As I mentioned, Prop 64, recreational use is now legal, and the state is establishing the licensing requirements, which go into effect after the first of the year. Just to give you some background, under that's the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, personal cultivation, so any individual may have up to 6 living plants be cultivated, harvested, or dried and processed within a single private residence by a person who's over the age of 21, so that's without restriction. So anybody can do that right now presently. An adult may legally possess up to 28.5 grams of marijuana or up to 4 grams of concentrated marijuana. Municipalities are allowed to regulate or ban personal outdoor cultivation. Municipalities can reasonably regulate but not ban indoor personal cultivation. So as part of this background, the police department had expressed concerns about allowing outdoor cultivation. And in coordinating with them on this particular issue, both community development and police had concerns about establishing a permitting program for indoor cultivation. We failed to see a benefit in that. If it's allowed by right under state law, we don't want to interfere with that provision. Under the AUMA, a jurisdiction retains the authority for regulating commercial cultivation, in which case they may regulate or ban it for both recreational or medical marijuana. And a municipality may also permit or restrict deliveries within the city limits. So as I mentioned before, on June 5th, the council adopted a resolution of intention that staff work with the Planning and Zoning Commission to extend these regulations, to extend to recreational dispensaries as well as the commercial cultivation. So just to give you a few highlights, we basically took the existing ordinance contained in 2020-110 of the municipal code. We've changed it simply to reflect marijuana regulations. We've added definitions related to recreational marijuana and dispensaries, and you see references within the zoning code to recreational. Where there's a provision on a medical prohibition, we've also included and recreational. The council was pretty specific on certain provisions, including prohibiting the delivery of marijuana within the city limits, which isn't under the current regulations. They wanted to prohibit the outdoor personal use cultivation, but as I mentioned, not really touch the indoor regulations, other than to include a provision about landlord consent for rental properties, and there is some new prescriptive criteria that we've put in there related to indoor cultivation. And with that, we've included Resolution 2017-06, which would, if adopted tonight, forward a formal recommendation to the City Council to amend Chapter 202110 of the Municipal Code.
Can I offer a simple amendment, or not amendment, but a change on the resolution?
Absolutely.
On the first page.
Get rid of prohibit.
What's that? Oh, no, sorry, line 17 and 18, it says add your language here and keep the spacing as, I think it's just a leftover.
Oh, like
It says add your language here and keep the spacing as it is because it's already set at a certain format.
Is it page 2, line 17?
I have page 1 of resolution number,
There was something
it's just a leftover.
it's a leftover from the template.
Yeah.
And then, I'll let you finish.
That's all I had.
Okay. And then I guess I just have like a kind of general quick question. So, I mean, my understanding is basically the city council is pretty explicit in what they want. So are we basically just like here to rubber stamp what they want and give it to them?
I think they set policy
Effectively,
direction.
yes. I mean, they set the policy on this, but they recognize that obviously the Planning and Zoning Commission are the keepers of Chapter 20, so this is a formality of procedures and bringing it back to the full commission for formal action.
Okay.
It looked pretty good, but I did have a couple comments, I thought. Let's see, jumping around. So under lighting, F, personal use cultivation regulations, lighting, there's no limit of when that lighting can take place. And if somebody wanted to like really fast grow their marijuana, they might have it on all night, especially in a greenhouse. So you wouldn't want a greenhouse lit all night if you're a neighbor, right? So there might be something you can say about limiting how much light.
Would you want to restrict it to hours of the day, or would you want?
Wouldn't it be an external? Do we have some kind of external measure outside the house? Because that's really what you're concerned about.
Yeah, the
isn't it?
really
So
outside
it's an
greenhouse. So inside, they can always pull the drapes, right?
Yeah. Well,
Hopefully they have drapes, but yeah. I'm really thinking about the greenhouse issue.
Okay.
Well, I think there are a few things that need to be clarified around that particular, like whether a
Greenhouse?
greenhouse is actually allowed or not, but.
Oh, you're right.
Under the state code, they consider the greenhouse part of residence. And so.
Yeah,
residence.
in a reading of the state law, if there is a greenhouse, it's considered enclosed and tantamount to indoor cultivation, so it would fall as a permitted use by right.
Well, but I think that because we're restricting what's allowed under state law, we need to be explicit that we're not, but anyway, I don't want to jump in the middle of
Okay,
your
all right, well,
comments. We'll come back to that.
The other one was evidence of cultivation. I think that might run contrary to the idea of good ventilation and things you might have to do to make sure that, how much evidence? I mean, if you're really a trained eye and you can see a certain type of ventilation, or you know they're growing pot, I don't know if there is such a thing, but it seems like maybe it should be qualified. I don't know.
Would you feel more comfortable just having that stricken from?
No, I think it's actually probably a good idea because you wouldn't want to advertise the fact people are growing, pot in a certain house for criminal reasons. But the same reason, if they had to put extra ventilation, which is required, you don't want to hide those. You wouldn't want to hide the vents.
Was that language suggested by the League of Cities?
This was actually language what we got from the city of Fremont, and they're doing a comprehensive update as well.
Maybe just to put a qualifier on it, like a glaring evidence or something, something that makes it very evident that they're growing marijuana in there, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just touch base really quick on this. That does seem like a very sort of broad sentence, and that,
Number 6.
Under F, I guess, it's like the fourth page.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, because unless the code, I don't know if the code actually defines what evidence is, but, I mean, could that just be like somebody wearing a marijuana T-shirt as they walk in, or having a, some kind of paraphernalia on their window, and then that could be
I guess
considered
seeing it from the window would be a key thing, right? Seeing the plant in the window.
So I don't know, I guess
Yeah,
my thought
well,
was just to.
maybe
somehow
it's a
clarify.
restriction of visibility. I mean, maybe we wordsmith it that way.
Yeah, I mean, we could extend it to
Yeah.
like.
Yeah,
also
visible evidence of visible evidence.
Yeah, there's a separate provision on odor. I mean, on this and a number of other provisions, I would suggest that staff look to the draft regulations that the state is putting out on both medical and non-medical, because the state is grappling with all of these issues. And even if we, as a city, don't decide to follow everything the state is doing, they've done a lot of the legwork.
Do you know which agency?
Sorry?
Is it like OPR, or is there's a new department, right?
And so to take a step back, and I will say that I have some professional experience in this.
That's hugely helpful.
So I think it's actually really important to note that it's not just about, this isn't just about Prop 64. So in 2015, the legislature adopted what was then called the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act. The name has changed a few times, and now it's like rolled into one big mega piece of legislation with the Prop 64 legislation. But basically, I think whatever the case law that you were referring to that triggered this desire to create the urgency measure for medical marijuana, I mean, that whole legal framework like doesn't even exist anymore. It's a whole new world of regulation that applies to both medical and non-medical. And so the state has a flotilla of different agencies that are all crafting regulations right now for different licensing categories. So the Department of Food and Agriculture is crafting regulations for a variety of different types of cultivation, sizes, and indoor, outdoor, mixed light, et cetera. The Department of, they keep changing their name too. It was initially called the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation, which they quickly figured out everyone was going to call Bummer.
They changed
so changed it, and I can't. And they've seriously changed the name like 6 or 7 times. So I don't know what they're calling themselves now. But that bureau that was newly created is developing regulations around manufacturing, and I think they may be also doing the distribution and delivery regulations. And then there's another set of regulations around quality control and testing. And so there's this massive regulatory package coming down the pike as of January 1st, 2018, if all the agencies stay on track. And I'm sorry to just to take the soapbox here about this, but there is a lot going on, and this is all like changing very fast. But I definitely think that to the extent possible, we should try to track with the way the state is describing the types of activities that Albany as a policy matter is going to allow. The more closely we align with the work that the state is already doing to define the state level licensing, it's going to lead to much less confusion and heartache and difficulty in implementation down the road. So that's kind of just my overall comment about how to approach this. I will also say that I fully respect and recognize that the council is taking this direction. I don't necessarily agree with it as a policy matter. I think that there's a long list of reasons that we should be talking about regulating the uses that I guarantee. I actually meant to look up what percentage of Albany voters voted in favor of Prop 64, but I'm sure it was a significant majority. I know any number of people who currently avail themselves of the medical marijuana card program and who are going to, it's like people, our neighbors, people in the community are going to be availing themselves of the new rights under Prop 64, as well as the medical marijuana regulations. And I don't think it's a good policy decision to say, well, we are going to allow a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing to cultivate indoors because that's what the state law says, but we don't want to professionalize, license, regulate, and tax it. I think that there are a lot of reasons we really should be moving in that direction. And so actually one question I had for you is, so I read the minutes from the city council, what's that?
They were terrible.
They were terrible.
Lack of information.
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand it. I'm sure there's so much that gets covered in these things. I did not watch the videos. But I'm curious, generally speaking, if the direction is, are we talking about this being just a moratorium once and forever, or is the council actually interested in, continuing to revisit the idea about whether this is something that should be regulated and allowed on a limited basis?
Particularly in the June meeting, that they would want to revisit it at a future point. I think their thinking was that you give it 2 years, see how the state licensing works out, and if it looks like it's a pretty well-organized thing, at that point they would consider amending the regulations to potentially allow it.
It's my understanding that if we don't have anything in place by January 1st, then it's open season, right? People can come in. Is that correct?
I'm sure the city attorney has been advising on that. I think that that's highly unlikely because we don't have a zoning code that would allow someone to just come in and set up a commercial business of, whatever sort without having to go through some kind of approval process. And it's kind of immaterial that it's it's marijuana. But yes, there would be a gap in the ordinance as far as, what you do with those types of applications.
It was my understanding that they want something in, even though it wasn't perfect, and then wait, let the dust settle, see what other communities are doing, see the impact, and then address it.
That being said, though, I mean, if it's the commission's desire that this be further refined, other regulations at the state level be examined before you take action, you're well within your discretion to do that. The only thing I would suggest is that we continue it to a date certain for our first meeting in October.
Well, and so what I was gonna, and I will try to wrap up, I know it's getting late. I spend a lot of time thinking about pot these days. So, I would like to recommend continuing this particular matter, and obviously we can have a discussion about whether others want to do that, but in any case, I do have a number of, so assuming that this is going to move forward, I'm not necessarily on board with this as a policy matter, but again, I respect that that's what the council wants to do. If this is moving forward, I do have a number of comments about how some of the language could be tightened up. So I don't know if people want to bear with me right now, or...
Well, if I may.
Now's the time, right?
I mean, I'm just going to say that I basically concur with the majority, if not everything, of what Commissioner Jennings said. I do think it would be highly advisable for us to continue this to a date certain so that staff can, at the very least, review the state regulations as much as you can get access to make sure that ours falls in line with that. And so that I have no problem sort of supporting that and doing that. My one comment and then my other comment was that when I watched the video of the council meetings, it seemed like it was either initiated by, or it seemed like it was just more so the city manager's agenda to get something on the books before January 1st. And so I didn't quite understand the reasoning behind that. She said, I just really think we should get something on the board before January.
So I think the concern is twofold. It's having something in advance of the implementation date. But I'll say this very diplomatically. If you've watched both videos, you saw that the conversation was also quite circular and extensive. And I think the intent behind that was not so much to, say that there's any sort of imminent issue, but more just to get them to a point where they could come to a conclusion, since they were somewhat split, certainly at the beginning and even a little bit in the second meeting.
Okay.
So my understanding, correct me, Commissioner Jennings, if you could, that if we don't have an ordinance in place by January 1st, then state law prevails, which means that someone can immediately apply for a commercial license, and then it's grandfathered in. If you came back later, then it's not.
No.
You're saying our current zoning would protect us from that?
Yeah, I think that's correct, because we do have a provision in our code that does, based on our existing regulations, I think that would protect us.
Yeah, and I don't want to, I mean, I'm sure, again, that the city attorney would have things to say about this, but the one key thing to understand about the state licensing, so at least as to cultivation, and I believe this is true for other categories of licensing as well, the state will not issue you a license unless you have your local land use approval first. And there is some limited grandfathering for commercial operations that were set up and in compliance with local law prior to a certain date. So there's a limited grandfathering to get your license, but if you don't have, currently you could not be licensed, or you couldn't have a land use permit to have a commercial marijuana business in the city of Albany, and therefore that would be an absolute bar on you getting state license. So like, I don't see any risk that if the city doesn't take action right away, that, suddenly there's going to be a pot store on every corner. That said, I mean, I understand there may be other good reasons that the city wants to get something on the books. And I don't presume to know all of the considerations that they're looking at.
So if we're going to continue the item, I guess what's the most efficient way to get comments? You just write them in?
Like it straight to the point.
Yeah.
I think that would be best. I mean, if Megan in particular has,
Yeah.
a lot of comments, I'm happy to make a copy of those and work through that.
That'd be great.
And also include it as an attachment to the forthcoming staff report.
Okay.
Just so you have that for reference.
I think that'd be good because, who knows if some of them are redundant from what you find when you do your research.
What would be the appropriate time frame to bring it back? You said October. Were you thinking the first meeting or the second meeting?
I'm thinking the first meeting. So we've gone ahead and canceled the second meeting in September, but we do have a couple agenda items for that first meeting in October, so we could bring this back and just schedule it for that date, which is October 11th.
And also, I do want to say that despite saying that I have a lot of comments, I want you to know that I really appreciate how much effort clearly has gone into this, and there's a lot of, it's just an extremely dynamic set of issues that is full of, it's just full of mines and traps, and I can, this is a really good start, but I just have some suggestions from having worked in this space a little bit about how to.
No, I'm appreciative of having a set of legal eyes on this, because it sounds like you have quite a bit of experience that would be helpful in crafting these regulations so that we don't have inconsistencies with state law.
The only other comment I'd like to add is I think whatever date we decide to continue this, certain date we decide to continue to, I would like to have the city attorney here so that he could give his interjection in it. I know he was at the city council meetings, and well, I shouldn't say this, but not to be disparaging of the city attorney, but just from my watching the city council meetings, from my perspective, I think your knowledge of this subject is much greater than his.
Which may get us in trouble.
I like trouble. So, I
We
appreciate
can ask
your
Craig
input.
to attend and provide legal counsel to you as you go through the regulations.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, especially if we have any other kind of questions that we're not quite sure about, being able to just directly address him. And so I guess then it's just a matter of determining a date to continue it to. And I guess it sounds like the first meeting in October we were talking about?
October 11 is what you said.
Yeah, the first meeting in October, which, just to confirm, it's Wednesday, the 11th.
And you're okay with that's enough time, sufficient time for you to do whatever you need to do? Okay.
I would move continuation of this till Wednesday, date certain at Wednesday, October 11th.
Okay, there's been a motion. I will second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. So this item has been continued. Just while we're all here, I mean, it seemed like the main thing, I watched the city council meeting videos, and it seemed like, yes, they wanted to maybe come back, but it seemed like their major concerns were things of how much will it affect in terms of finances and actual staffing? How much will it affect not only the police, but also our city staff in regulating it? And I think they were also just sort of really wrangling with the notion of what should we include in this sort of grocery bag of items? Like, should we regulate personal cultivation versus should we regulate commercial cultivation? Should we allow cultivation versus just allowing a dispensary? Medical versus recreational? And so I think they were kind of, for lack of better, they were kind of all over the place. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot to be sort of determined and figured out, which maybe we'll just have to wait.
I think it was, I'm not sure who it was, somebody on the council mentioned that by prohibit the being grown outside, you're basically making everybody use electricity and damage the buildings with moisture instead of just letting Mother Nature happen, which was a pretty good point, actually.
Yeah.
It's a brave new world we're in.
Right?
All right, and then I guess our last final items are, no new business, and then our next meeting.
Yeah, the September 27th meeting, we have canceled that, and so we'll meet again in another month on October 11th.
October 11th, okay. Any other announcements, communications, discussions? Okay, with that, I will call to adjourn this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I do feel we got to work on our phrases and metaphors.